At 43, I never expected a simple meeting to change my life so dramatically. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Virginia, and until recently, I thought I had it all together. I've been married to Kent for 16 years, and we've got a good thing going, no kids, successful careers, and a stable relationship. Maybe it's been a little stale lately, but I didn't think much of it until that fateful night. It was a typical Saturday, and my sister Anna was hosting a family dinner at her place to celebrate her eldest son Mason's 23rd birthday. Mason has always been a charmer, super smart, and mature beyond his years. We've always had a special bond. He's my favorite nephew, and I'm his go-to aunt. Since I never had kids of my own, Mason kind of filled that void. As we gathered around the dinner table, laughter and love filled the air. The dinner was great and very delicious. Wine was flowing, and we were all having a blast. Kent, my husband, got a little too comfortable. Kent's frequent indulgence in wine started to affect him. As usual, he's not an alcoholic, but at family gatherings, he tends to overdo it. By the end of the night, he was barely standing. "Virginia, I think I need help getting to the car," he slurred, his eyes all glassy. I sighed, resigned to the familiar ritual, but then Mason appeared, his concerned eyes locking onto mine. "Aunt Virginia, do you need help?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine care. In that moment, something shifted. The usual dynamics of our family gathering were about to take an unexpected turn. "Thank you, dear. Yes, your uncle is a bit indisposed," I replied, appreciating the offer. With Mason's help, we finally managed to corral Kent into the car, his snores harmonizing with the hum of the engine as we set off into the night. The 25-minute drive flew by in a whirlwind of conversation. Mason and I discussing everything from his studies to his dreams for the future. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and wonder at the young man he was becoming. Upon arriving home, we joined forces once more to help Kent out of the car and into the bedroom. We gently laid him on the bed, and I took off his shoes. Mason was waiting at the bedroom door, like he didn't want to intrude on our privacy. "Thanks for your help, Mason," I said, as we left the room, and I closed the door behind me. "You're welcome, Aunt Virginia. You know you can always count on me," he replied with this intense smile. We headed to the kitchen, and I grabbed a glass of water. I figured Mason might want to refresh himself before heading back to his parents' place. As we sipped our water in silence, I noticed Mason seemed nervous, like he wanted to say something but was hesitant. "Hey, are you okay, dear? You seem a bit tense," I asked, genuinely concerned. Mason took a long sip of water before answering. "Aunt Virginia, the truth is, there's something I'd like to talk to you about. Do you have a moment?" His serious tone alarmed me a little. "Of course I do, Mason. You know you can talk to me about anything. What's happening?" He ran his hand through his hair. "A nervous habit since childhood. It's complicated. There's a woman involved." My heart was touched. My little Mason was in love. "Oh dear, that's wonderful. Why are you so nervous? Doesn't she love you back?" Mason let out a bitter laugh. "I wish it were that simple, Aunt. The problem is she's older than me, a bit older. And she's married." I felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My sweet and innocent Mason, in love with a married woman. "Mason, I don't know what to say. This is a very delicate situation. Are you sure about your feelings?" He nodded firmly. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life, Aunt. I love her. I love her like I've never loved anyone. But Mason, she's married. This isn't right. You could destroy a marriage, a family." "I know, Aunt, believe me, I know. I've been fighting against these feelings for months, but I can't take it anymore. I need to tell her. I need her to know." I felt a pang of compassion for my nephew. I remember how intense feelings could be at his age, how everything seemed absolute. "Mason, I understand that your feelings are strong, but you need to think about the consequences. What will happen if you tell her? Have you thought about how this will affect the whole family?" Mason was silent for a moment, as if gathering courage for something. Then he raised his head and fixed his gaze on mine with an intensity that made me shudder. "Aunt Virginia, the woman I'm in love with, it's you. The world stopped at that instant. I felt as if the ground beneath my feet was disappearing, and I was falling into a bottomless abyss. This couldn't be true. I must have heard wrong. Mason. What? What are you saying? I managed to stammer, instinctively backing up until my back hit the kitchen counter. He took a step towards me, his eyes full of an emotion I didn't want to recognize. I love you, Aunt Virginia. I've loved you for as long as I can remember. At first, I thought it was just admiration, the normal affection of a nephew for his favorite aunt. But as time passed, I realized it was much more than that. You're the most beautiful, intelligent, and wonderful woman I've ever known. My thoughts were in a whirlwind. I couldn't process what I was hearing. It felt like a nightmare or a cruel joke, but the seriousness in Mason's eyes made it clear he was not joking. Mason, you can't be serious. This is fundamentally wrong. Shame on you. I'm your aunt, married to your uncle, and we're 31 years apart. This can't happen. I tried to make my voice sound firm, but I could hear the tremor in it. Mason made another step towards me, lessening the distance between us. I know it seems ridiculous, Aunt, but believe me, I tried to fight it. I've dated other girls and tried to forget you, but it's no use. My feelings for you are more intense than anything else. His hand rose, as if to touch my face, but halted in the middle. I was paralyzed and unable to move or form rational thoughts. Mason, please understand that this cannot happen. We are family. I am your mother's age. All of a sudden, I could no longer ignore how gorgeous Mason had grown. The boy who used to perch on my knee has grown up. With a look that could melt ice, he was a robust and youthful man. I whispered to myself, more to myself than to him, this can't be happening. Mason, you have to go. Let's now ignore that this chat ever took place. However, he remained still. Rather, he moved closer to me, erasing nearly all of the distance between us. I could smell the wine from supper combined with his cologne and feel the heat of his body. Mason, could you please? I pleaded, though I was unsure of my demands at the time. Then it took place. Mason moved closer to me and planted a kiss on me. His lips were warm, supple, and demanding. For an instant, I was immobilized and unable to respond. Then I discovered that I was reacting to the kiss, much to my shock and humiliation. I felt as though a dam had broken inside of me. In one kiss, all the emotions I'd been holding in and all the passion I'd forgotten existed spilled out. I pulled him in closer as my hands became tangled in his hair. I don't know how long that kiss lasted. It could have been seconds or an eternity. When we finally separated, we were both breathless. The gravity of what had just occurred struck me like a train. Oh my God, what have we done? I whispered, filled with horror. Mason, on the other hand, seemed euphoric. His eyes shone with a mixture of love and desire that scared and excited me in equal parts. What we should have done a long time ago, Aunt Virginia. Shaking my head, trying to get my ideas straight, I said, being honest with our feelings. Mason, this is incorrect. Terribly incorrect. I'm not sure what got to me, but it must not occur again. Never again. He refused to move when I attempted to push him away. Rather, he forced me to look him in the eyes by holding my face in his hands. I know you're terrified, Aunt Virginia. Knowing you, I know this is incorrect. However, what just transpired? Will you pretend to me that you didn't experience that spark, that connection? It was impossible for me to dispute. A part of me that I thought had died was reawakened by that kiss. However, that didn't change the fact that this was a grave error. Mason, I hope you get it. Your aunt is me. My spouse and I are married. This is not possible. How about if it could? He insisted, hope and determination shining in his eyes. What if we could find a way? I closed my eyes, trying to find the strength to do the right thing. When I opened them again, my voice was firmer. There is no way, Mason. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake that should never have happened and will never happen again. You have to leave now. I saw the pain in his eyes, but I also saw that he understood I wasn't going to change my mind. At least not tonight. Slowly, he took a step back, freeing me from the prison of his body. I'll go, Aunt Virginia, but this isn't over. What I feel for you is real, and I know you felt something too. I won't give up on you so easily. With those words, he turned and left the kitchen. I heard the front door open and close, and then the sound of his car driving away. I fell to the floor, trembling. What had just happened? How had I allowed things to go so far? And worst of all, why did part of me wish Mason hadn't left? I spent the rest of the night awake, tossing and turning on the couch, unable to return to the bed where Kent slept oblivious to everything. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Guilt, shame, dread, and to my dismay, a spark of exhilaration and desire that I couldn't ignore. When Kent awoke the next morning with a bad hangover, I told him an altered version of what had happened the night before. I informed him that Mason had acted inappropriately by insinuating himself, but I left out the kiss and my own behavior. Kent was outraged, of course, and wanted to phone my sister and tell her everything. I persuaded him not to, claiming that it would just cause issues in the family, and that Mason was likely confused and sorry. The ensuing days were torturous. Every time the phone rang, my heart raced, fearing it was Mason. Every time I went out on the street, I looked nervously around, expecting to see him on every corner. But he didn't call, didn't show up. I don't know if I was relieved or disappointed by this. Kent, for his part, was more attentive than usual. I think my story about Mason's behavior had alarmed him. He brought me flowers for no reason, invited me out to dinner, and even suggested we take a vacation together. Under other circumstances, I would have been very happy with this renewed attention. But now, it only served to increase my guilt. A week after the incident, I received a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk, please. See." My heart raced as I read the message. I knew I should ignore it, delete it, and move on with my life. But I couldn't. Instead, I found myself replying, "Okay, tomorrow 3 p.m. at the Park Cafe." The next day was an agony of nerves and anticipation. I dressed more carefully than usual, applying light makeup and choosing a dress I knew suited me. I felt guilty about this, but I couldn't help it. Mason was already at the cafe, seated at a lonely table, when I arrived 10 minutes ahead of schedule. When he spotted me, he stood up, and his gaze moved over my figure in a way that made me blush. "Aunt Virginia," he whispered softly as I approached. "Thank you for attending." I sat across from him, aware of the tension that existed between us. "Mason, this cannot happen again." What transpired that night was genuine. He interrupted me. It was the most real feeling I'd ever had. I sighed and closed my eyes for a bit. "Mason, you are young. You have your entire life ahead of you. Everything you believe you feel for me will fade. You will meet someone your own age with whom you can build a future together." He shook his head, a fierce determination lighting up his gaze. "Not that I desire anyone else. Auntie Virginia, you are mine. I also know that you experienced something that evening. You can't deny it." It was true. I couldn't deny it, but that didn't make a difference. "Mason, I'm your aunt, your mother's age, and I married your uncle. This is incorrect in a lot of ways." He leaned forward and declared that love is always right. "I am aware that there are challenges, but we can get past them. Collectively." His words struck me like an arrow. A part of me yearned to believe him, to embrace him, and to forget everything else. Yet, my rational mind knew this was impossible. "Mason, please realize that regardless of our feelings or desires, this is not possible. It would be too expensive. Our family would be destroyed. Your dad, your mother. Have you considered their potential reactions to this?" The pain was visible in his eyes. However, I could also see that he was hearing what I was saying. "But what about our happiness, Aunt Virginia? We ought to be joyful, don't we?" I said softly. "Mason, happiness built on the suffering of others never lasts. In addition, have you given it much thought as to what it would entail? We would have to lie all the time and hide. We would be plagued by shame and anxiety. Mason, that's a fantasy. That's not love." He was silent for a while as he thought about what I had said. At last, his voice became strained as he spoke. "What then ought I do? How could I possibly forget how I feel about you?" His anguish caused a small hole in my heart. I grabbed his hand from across the table. "I'm sure it won't be simple. Mason, you're young though. Your entire life lies ahead of you. These emotions will pass in due course. You'll run into someone else, someone with whom you can truly build a future. With tears still in his eyes, he gave me a firm handshake. I've never loved somebody as much as I love you. I told him, you will love. And at that point, you'll see why this was not possible. We silently held hands for a brief period of time. Mason finally gave a slow nod. Though I don't agree, I do understand Aunt Virginia, and I swear I'll make an effort to move on. I experienced a peculiar sense of loss along with a sense of comfort. Mason, thank you. Although it's not simple, doing this is the correct thing to do. We awkwardly hugged each other goodbye, both of us knowing there was still tension between us. I was filled with regret as I watched him leave. Was I acting morally, or was fear and social convention causing me to miss something special? The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. On the one hand, I felt happy that I had made the correct decision and stopped something that would have ruined our family. But I was obsessed with Mason, with the depth of his emotions, and the possibilities of what might have been. My mood changed, and Kent noticed what I had told him about the event with Mason. It made me feel even more guilty because he was showing me more love and attention than before. I couldn't have imagined betraying this man who had shown me such affection. After a few weeks, life gradually returned to normal, or at least a modified version of it. It became awkward to be alone with family, and Mason and I even avoided looking at each other for extended periods of time. No one dared to ask what was going on, but I could feel my sister and brother-in-law looking at me with confusion. Almost 2 months after our first meeting at the cafe, Mason sent me another message one night. I apologized to Aunt Virginia. You were correct. I did meet someone. I appreciate everything that you have done. I felt a range of mixed feelings as I read the message multiple times. Yeah, it was a relief that Mason was going on, but I was sorry to admit there was also a hint of sorrow and jealousy. As I lay awake beside Kent that night, I thought back on all that had transpired. Had I made the correct decision, or had fear and social norms caused me to miss out on the chance for true love? I was at a loss for words. All I knew was that I had to move on for the good of everybody. Deep down, I had to push those conflicted emotions and that forbidden attraction away. Life continued as the months went by. Mason began attending family get-togethers with his new partner. She was a lovely girl, about his age, and I could see how happy she made him. I was happy for him, genuinely, although a small part of me couldn't help but wonder, what if Kent and I worked on our relationship? The shock of the incident with Mason made us realize we had fallen into routine and complacency. We started doing more things together, communicating better, and rediscovering why we had fallen in love in the first place. And I learned a lot about myself through this whole process. I learned that even after years of marriage, I could still feel passion and desire. I learned that love can take unexpected forms and that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. I kept the secret of what had really happened that night in the kitchen. It was a burden I decided to carry alone, to protect everyone involved. But I can't deny that, despite the guilt and shame, a part of me cherished the memory of that moment of forbidden passion. Life is full of roads not taken, of unexplored possibilities. I'll always wonder what if, but in the end, I'm at peace with my choices. I chose stability over passion, family over desire. And although sometimes in the dead of night my mind wanders to what could have been, I know in my heart that I made the right choice. This experience taught me that love can be complicated, confusing, and sometimes painful. But it also showed me the strength of commitment, the importance of family, and the power of doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. Now, years later, I can look back on that night in the kitchen with a mix of nostalgia and relief. It was a moment of madness, a flash of passion that illuminated my life in unexpected ways. But like all intense flames, it was destined to burn out quickly. Mason is now a happily married man with a beautiful family. I'm still with Kent, and our relationship is stronger than ever after going through that test without him knowing. And although sometimes, when our eyes meet at family gatherings, I might see a glimpse of what once was, we both know it's part of the past. Life is full of turning points and paths that fork. That night in the kitchen was one of those moments for me. I chose the harder path, the path of duty and responsibility, instead of the path of passion and desire. And although sometimes I wonder how the other path might have been, I know in my heart that I made the right choice, because in the end, love isn't just about passion and desire. It's about being devoted, making sacrifices, and acting morally even when it's difficult. And letting go is sometimes the greatest gesture of love. I treasure this moment of wildness and desire as a secret that I will never reveal. A reminder that we are never too old to feel, desire, and love, and that life might surprise us. And even if I haven't revealed the secret, the feeling I had that day was worthwhile. It served as a reminder that I was still alive and that I had the ability to feel and burn. And that is a priceless gift in and of itself. So keep in mind that love can come in many different forms, some unexpected, some forbidden, if you ever find yourself at a similar crossroads. However, ultimately, being loyal to who you are and your principles is what matters most. Since these serve as the cornerstones around which our relationships, lives, and futures are constructed, perhaps in a different life or world, Masson and I are experiencing that forbidden passion together. Who knows? Nonetheless, we have chosen the route of responsibility and obligation in this life and on this earth. I know it was the right choice, even though it might be challenging and painful at times. I know I made the correct choice, even though I'll always remember that night in the kitchen and that prohibited passionate moment because, in the end, true love isn't just about how we feel, but also about what we do with those feelings. And I went with love in its most responsible and grown-up form. I went with ethics, dedication, and family. And even though I occasionally ponder, what if? I firmly believe that I wouldn't alter my choice. Thanks for watching.